Winter Creek, Arizona Territory, December 1887. Snow cuts like broken glass across the street when a half-frozen 8-year-old girl tugs the sleeve of the most feared Apache warrior in the territory and whispers, "Mom hasn't eaten in 3 days. Buy my necklace? It looks just like yours." In that single heartbeat, Nantan, the man they call the Chiricahua Ghost, stares at an eagle bone pendant he carved with his own hands 8 winters ago for a woman who vanished without a trace. One desperate child, one forgotten necklace, one secret that will force a warrior to choose between the past he buried and the family he never knew he had, in a land where love across bloodlines is punished by fire and lead. Some stories end in graves. This one ends around a campfire no one believed could ever burn again. Drop your city or country in the comments. Where are you listening from tonight? And stay until the final ember dies, because the miracle begins with a little girl selling the only thing she has left. You won't want to miss how it saves an entire people. The wind came down from the Dragoon Mountains like a living thing, clawing at the clappered storefronts of Winter Creek, Arizona Territory, December 1887. It carried ice that stung like buckshot, and the smell of a storm big enough to bury a man before he knew he was dead. Nantan set his paint horse at the edge of town, coat collar turned up, eyes narrowed against the driven snow. 33 winters had carved him lean and hard, cheekbones sharp as flint, black hair braided tight beneath a battered campaign hat, a Henry repeater across the pommel, and a Navy Colt under the buffalo coat. They called him the Chiricahua Ghost in the saloons, said he could ride through a company of cavalry and leave nothing but empty saddles and silence. He didn't care what they called him. He only cared that the trading post still had 44 rimfire and coarse salt before the pass closed for the season. He swung down, boots crunching on frozen mud, and looped the reins over the rail. Inside, the stove glowed dull red, but the stairs were colder. Men pretended to study catalogs while watching him from the corners of their eyes. Nantan ignored them, dropped $3 silver on the counter for cartridges and salt, and turned to leave. That was when he felt it, a small, desperate tug at the fringe of his coat. He looked down. A girl no taller than his cartridge belt stood half-hidden in the blowing snow, cheeks raw, lips blue, a threadbare shawl doing nothing against the wind. 8 winters at most, maybe less. Bones showed through the skin of her wrists. Her eyes, dark brown, huge, Apache eyes, stared up at him with the look of something cornered and ready to bolt. "Mister," the word came out thin, almost lost in the wind. "Mom hasn't eaten in 3 days." She swallowed, then opened a fist that trembled like an aspen leaf. "Could you buy my necklace? It looks just like yours." In her palm lay an eagle bone pendant, 3 inches long, carved with the lightning spirals and mountain knots only one Chiricahua family ever used. Rawhide cord, turkey feather binding, the tiny notch on the lower wing where Nantan's knife had slipped 8 years ago while he worked by firelight, laughing with the woman he loved. His breath stopped. The store, the men, the howling storm, everything vanished. 8 years collapsed into a single heartbeat. He had carved that pendant the night before Elena disappeared. He had tied it around her neck himself, kissed the hollow of her throat, promised her the mountains would keep them safe forever. Then dawn came, and she was gone. No note, no tracks, only rumors that the Holt family had dragged her east to marry money and wash the shame from their name. Nantan crouched slowly, bringing his eyes level with the child's. Snowflakes melted on her lashes. She smelled of wood smoke and hunger. "What's your name, little one?" "Clara," a whisper. Clara Holt. Holt. The name hit him like a 50-70 slug behind the ribs. Jacob Holt's brand was on half the cattle between here and the border. Jacob Holt, the man the whispers said Elena had been forced to wed. Nantan reached out, slow so he wouldn't scare her, and turned the pendant toward the lantern light. Same notch, same knots, same blood memory carved into bone. "Where'd you get this?" His voice came out rougher than intended. "It's Mama's. She said if I ever got really hungry, I could sell it. Said somebody might pay good for something pretty." Clara's chin trembled, but her eyes stayed steady. "She's awfully sick. Fever. Can't even stand no more." The trader behind the counter cleared his throat, pretending not to listen. Outside, the wind screamed louder, rattling the tin sign like bones in a grave. Nantan closed the girl's frozen fingers over the pendant. "Keep it on your neck, Clara! Where's your mama?" She pointed with a shaking arm toward the shanty town south of the creek, where the broken cabins huddled like old dogs waiting to die. "Show me." Clara hesitated only a heartbeat, then slipped her hand into his. Her fingers were ice, but she didn't let go. He lifted her onto the front of his saddle, pulled the buffalo robe around them both, and turned the paint horse into the teeth of the coming storm. Snow already covered their tracks before they reached the edge of town. Behind them, the trading post door slammed shut against the wind, and every man inside knew the ghost had just ridden off with something far more dangerous than cartridges and salt. The paint picked its way along the frozen creek, hooves punching through the crust like muffled gunshots. Clara clung to the saddle horn, small body shaking inside Nantan's coat. Snow had already wiped the town from sight. Only the horse's breath and the child's ragged breathing told him they were still alive. They left the last lantern glow behind and dropped into the gulch, where the poorest dug in like ticks. Tar paper shacks leaned against each other, half buried under drifts. No light, no smoke. Even the dogs had quit barking. Clara pointed with a mittened hand that had no mitten. There. One shack sagged worse than the rest. Walls of warped pine and rusted tin. Roof caved on the north side so the whole thing looked ready to fold like a tired horse. A single tin chimney poked up, cold and dead. Nantan swung down, lifted Clara clear, and pushed the door with his shoulder. Leather hinges screamed. Inside smelled of wet ash, sickness, and something worse, defeat. A coal oil lamp burned low on an upturned crate. By its sickly light, he saw her. Elena lay on a straw pallet shoved against the far wall, blanket no thicker than a newspaper pulled to her chin. 8 years had carved her down to bone and shadow. Auburn hair, once bright as new copper, hung lank and dull. Cheekbones stood out like ridgepoles under skin gone the color of old parchment. When the door opened, she tried to rise on one elbow, failed, and collapsed back. Her eyes, green, fever-bright, found Nantan and widened in pure terror. "No!" A cracked whisper. "You can't be here. Jacob's men ride these roads every night. If they see you..." Her voice gave out in a cough that rattled like dry beans in a can. Nantan crossed the room in 3 strides, boots grinding on the dirt floor. He knelt, pulled the blanket back just enough to see the truth. Ribs showing, collarbones sharp enough to cut paper, a bruise the color of storm clouds along her jaw that was only 2 days old. Clara hovered at his elbow. "Mama said not to let anybody in, but I brought him anyway." Elena's hand found the child's wrist, gripped hard. "Clara, outside. Now!" The girl didn't move. Nantan laid 2 fingers against Elena's throat, pulse racing, skin dry and hotter than a branding iron. "Save your breath," he said low. "I'm getting you both out." "You don't understand." The words scraped out. "They'll kill you. They'll kill her to punish me." Jacob swore it. He was already moving, rolling the blanket around her like a papoose, lifting her weight, that was hardly more than a 10-year-old boy's. She tried to fight, weak fists against his chest. "Listen once," he growled close to her ear. "8 years ago, your people stole you. Tonight I'm stealing you back. Nobody left behind." He carried her out into the wind. Clara scrambled after, clutching the lamp that guttered and died the moment the storm hit it. Outside, the paint snorted at the new burden. Nantan laid Elena across the saddle, belly down, blanket wrapped tight, then swung up behind her. He reached down, caught Clara under one arm, and hauled her up in front of him. The horse staggered under the load, but held. Elena's voice drifted up, thin as smoke. "South Pass is watched. They'll be waiting." "Then we don't take the South Pass." He reined the paint west, straight into the black teeth of the mountains, where no sane man rode in a blizzard. Snow closed over their tracks, faster than any posse could follow. Behind them, the shack stood empty, door banging in the wind, like a mouth trying to scream a warning no one would ever hear. The trail narrowed to a knife edge between granite walls, snow choking the sky until there was nothing but white falling into black. The paint labored, blowing steam, hooves slipping on ice hidden under powder. Elena lay limp across the saddlebow, breath shallow and hot against Nantan's wrist. Clara pressed tight against his chest, silent now, too cold even for tears. He took a game trail no map had ever marked, one the old ones used when cavalry still thought they owned these mountains. Pines crowded close, branches dumping loads of snow with every gust. Somewhere behind them, Winter Creek was already a rumor. Then the horse stopped dead, ears flat. Muzzle flare split the dark ahead, orange blossoms in the storm. A rifle bullet whined off rock inches from Nantan's head and showered him with stone splinters. 4 riders blocked the defile, coats white with snow, faces hidden under hat brims. Jacob Holt sat in the middle, Winchester across his thighs, blood already crusting the left sleeve where a Chiricahua arrow had kissed him years ago and left its mark. "End of the line, Breed." Jacob's voice carried easily over the wind, lazy and mean. "Hand over my wife and my legal daughter, or we start digging graves right here." Nantan eased the Henry from its scabbard slowly, one-handed, keeping the other arm around Clara. Elena stirred, tried to lift her head. "Jacob." Her voice cracked like thin ice. "Let us go. She's not yours." "Blood says different." He spat red onto the snow. "The judge in Tucson already signed the papers. You're coming home, Elena, even if I have to drag you behind my horse. And the half-breed whelp comes too. Family honor's worth more than one dead savage." The man on Jacob's left levered around, grin showing broken teeth. "Boss says we can shoot the Apache first." Nantan felt Clara's small body go rigid. He leaned forward, lips near her ear. "Close your eyes, little one. Count to 10. The first shot came from the dark above the trail. Chiricahua scouts Nantan had signaled with a low owl call an hour back. An arrow took the grinning man through the throat. He toppled without a sound. All hell answered. Guns thundered in the narrow canyon, flashes strobing like summer lightning. The paint screamed and reared. Nantan rolled clear, Henry barking steadily, working the lever smooth as breathing. One rider folded over his pommel, and another horse went down kicking, pinning its rider beneath. Jacob charged straight through the smoke, revolver roaring. A bullet burned across Nantan's ribs, hot iron on frozen skin. He lunged inside the arc, knife flashing once. Deep under the ribs, twist, out. Jacob gasped, eyes wide with shock more than pain, and slid from the saddle into the snow. Blood steamed black in the cold. The last outlaw tried to wheel and run. A second arrow pinned his coat to a pine trunk. He hung there screaming until the storm swallowed the sound. Silence fell, broken only by wind and the wet snorts of dying horses. Nantan knelt beside Jacob. The rancher pressed both hands to his belly, trying to hold himself together. Snow soaked red around him. "She ain't yours," Nantan said, voice flat as a grave marker. "Never was. My blood runs in that child." "Say it." Jacob coughed up blood that froze on his beard. "Go to hell." Nantan leaned closer. "Already been. 8 years without them. You just bought yourself the express ticket." He stood, wiped the knife on Jacob's coat, and walked back to the paint. Elena stared at the body with eyes too dry for tears. Clara hadn't opened hers yet. Nantan lifted them both, settled Elena behind the saddle, and Clara in front. The horse trembled, but took the weight. Somewhere far off, wolves began to sing. He touched his heel to the paint's flank, and they moved on, deeper into the mountains, leaving 4 fresh mounds for the storm to bury. And if you're riding this far with us through the blood and snow, do me one favor. Hit that subscribe button. Right now. Because what happens next, when a half-starved little girl saves an entire Apache camp from a mudslide no grown warrior saw coming, that's the part that still raises chills around Chiricahua fires 30 winters later. You don't want to miss it. Dawn found them high in the Chiricahua strongholds, where the pines grew so thick the snow barely reached the ground. Nantan's people had wintered here since before the Spanish came. Wickiups tucked under red cliffs, smoke rising thin and straight in the cold, clear air. He rode in, leading the paint by the bridle, Elena slung across the saddle like a wounded deer, Clara walking beside him, with one small hand twisted in the horse's mane. Every eye in camp turned. Children stopped their games. Women paused with water gourds half raised. The warriors reached for rifles without thinking. Old Kaskoli, the headman, stepped forward, blanket wrapped tight against the wind. His gaze went from the white woman to the child, then to the blood-frozen black on Nantan's coat. "You bring trouble home, Nantan." "I bring family," he answered. Murmurs rippled like wind across dry grass. A woman spat. Another pulled her own children closer. Half-blood children were bad medicine in hard times. They drew soldiers, drew lies, drew bullets. They gave Elena the healing wickiup anyway, because no Chiricahua turns away the sick, even when the sick is white. The medicine woman, Yana, stripped away the filthy blanket and hissed at what she saw. Ribs like washboards, old whip scars across the back, fresh bruises blooming purple. She brewed willow bark and bare root, forced bitter tea between cracked lips. Clara refused to leave her mother's side. She sat cross-legged on the packed earth, eyes huge, watching everything. When Yana needed firewood, Clara was gone and back before anyone asked twice, arms full of pine knots, cheeks red from the cold. When the old ones needed water, she carried the Ola without spilling a drop. She spoke no Apache yet, but she understood silence, and she worked like someone born to it. 3 weeks slid past. Elena's fever broke on a night when the moon bled red behind the peaks. She woke weak but alive, hair cropped short to kill the lice, skin still stretched tight over bone. Clara slept, curled against her like a pup. Outside, opinion stayed hard. At council fires, men spoke low. The child would bring cavalry. The woman would bring sorrow. Better to send them down the mountain come spring. Nantan listened and said nothing. He hunted alone, brought back deer and small game, laid the best cuts at the door of the healing wickiup without a word. Then the big storm came. It rolled in from Mexico black as a buffalo herd, wind screaming through the canyons like 1,000 dying horses. Snow turned to sleet, then to rain that froze as it fell. The camp broke and moved deeper into a narrow side canyon where the cliffs leaned close enough to break the worst of the wind. They worked fast, women packing children on travois, old men driving the horse herd ahead. By dusk, the new camp was set. Fires small and smokeless under rock overhangs. Midnight. The rain had stopped, but the mountains still groaned under the weight of water. Clara woke suddenly, sat bolt upright in the robes. She cocked her head the way a coyote does when it smells danger. She heard it again, a low, grinding sound, like the earth itself chewing bone. She scrambled out, barefoot on frozen mud, and ran through the sleeping calm, tugging at blankets. "Wake up! The ground is talking!" Most rolled over. Children whined. One old woman cuffed her for the noise. Clara kept running until she found Nantan standing watch on a ledge above the canyon mouth. She grabbed his hand and pulled him down to the creek bed. "Listen," he knelt. Under the hush of dripping pines, he felt it. A deep, slow tremor, the kind that comes before the mountain lets go. High above, in the dark, snowmelt and rain had loosened a whole hillside of mud and rock. It was moving, slow at first, gathering speed. Nantan's shout cut the night like a knife. "Up! Higher ground! Now!" Warriors boiled out of wiki-ups, grabbing children, dragging old ones. Horses screamed. The first rumble grew to a roar that shook teeth in their sockets. They made the upper bench with heartbeats to spare. Below, the canyon was filled with a black river of mud and boulders that tore full-grown pines out by the roots and carried them like matchsticks. The place where half the camp had slept an hour earlier disappeared under a moving wall 20 feet high. When the thunder finally died, the canyon was a raw scar. Silence pressed down heavier than the storm. Old Cascoli stood on the ledge, blanket forgotten around his shoulders, staring at the child who still held Nantan's hand. Clara's feet were bleeding from running over sharp stones, but she didn't seem to notice. Cascoli knelt, slowly, and placed both hands on her shoulders. "Little sister," he said in Apache, "the mountain spoke to you tonight. You listened. You are Chiricahua." That night, around the rebuilt fire, they gave her a new name, Twe Ndiiwe, she who hears the earth breathe, and no one ever spoke again of sending her away. Spring came late that year, but when it came, it poured green fire across the mountains. Snowmelt roared in every draw, wildflowers punched up through the black scars left by the mudslide, and the Chiricahua breathed easier for the first time in a long winter. Elena grew strong again. She learned to grind corn on the metate, to twist yucca fiber into rope, to laugh without looking over her shoulder. Clara, now Twe Ndiiwe to the people, Clara only when her mother called, ran barefoot with the other children, her Apache tongue quick and sure, her English saved for the rare traders who risked the high trails. Peace lasted exactly 4 moons. One July dawn, dust rose on the southern ridge like smoke from a grass fire. 20 riders, maybe more, coming hard. Jacob Holt rode in the middle, left arm in a sling, face twisted with hate and laudanum. With him came a deputy U.S. Marshal, 2 bounty men wearing tin stars bought in Tucson saloons, and a thick sheaf of papers fluttering like surrender flags. They stopped at the edge of camp, rifles across saddles, arrogance thick as the dust behind them. Jacob's voice carried the old poison. "Elena Holt, by order of the territorial court, you are to surrender yourself and the minor child Clara Holt into my legal custody. Resistance will be met with force." Warriors fanned out silently, bows half drawn, rifles lifted from wiki-up doors. Children vanished. Old Cascoli stood unmoving, but his eyes were winter cold. Nantan stepped forward alone, Henry's repeater loose in his hands. "Ride out, Holt. You're on Chiricahua land. Your paper means buffalo chips here." The deputy cleared his throat, uncomfortable in the saddle. "I got jurisdiction, Injun. The judge signed it. The girl's white. Belongs with her lawful kin." Elena walked out then, straight-backed, hair braided tight, Clara at her side. The girl's hand rested on the little skinning knife Nantan had given her the week she turned 9. "Jacob," Elena said, voice steady as a lodgepole. "You put that bruise on my jaw last winter. You burned our cabin when we ran. You chased us with dogs. The only kin that child has stands right here." Jacob laughed, high and cracked. "Kin? A breed in his squaw. Tucson says different." He nodded to the deputy. "Do your duty." The deputy started forward. 30 Chiricahua rifles came up smooth as one breath. Then another rider pushed through the dust. An older man, gray mustache, badge polished bright. Marshal Donovan, the same federal man who had quietly slipped Elena out of Jacob's ranch years before, when the beatings got too loud for even Tucson to ignore. He reined in between the lines, raised a hand. "Stand easy, boys." Donovan swung down, pulled a rolled document from his saddlebag, and let it fall open. Sunlight glinted off fresh wax seals. "Jacob Holt, you are under arrest for arson, assault, forgery, and attempted murder. These affidavits are signed by 3 witnesses who watched you set fire to Mrs. Holt's cabin in '85. This court order," he tapped another paper, "declares the previous guardianship null and void on grounds of fraud. And this one," he looked straight at Nantan, "recognizes the child's natural father by blood oath and Apache custom, witnessed and sealed by the territorial governor himself." Jacob's face went the color of old tallow. "You're lying. Money bought those." Donovan's Colt cleared leather faster than thought. The hammer clicked back loudly in the sudden quiet. "One more word, Jacob, and I drop you for resisting." Jacob's good hand twitched toward his holster. Clara stepped forward, 9 years old, barefoot, eyes like chipped obsidian, and planted herself between her father and the gun. "No more killing because of me," she said in clear Apache, then switched to English for the white men. "Go home, Mr. Holt. You lost." Something broke in Jacob then. Rage, pride, or just the last thread of sanity. He yanked his revolver free. Donovan fired once. The report rolled off the cliffs like summer thunder. Jacob slid from the saddle slowly, knees first, then face down in the dust his horses had raised. The bounty men let their rifles sag. No pay was worth dying on Red Rock for a dead man's grudge. By nightfall, the riders were gone. Jacob's body lashed over his own saddle. Papers burned in the cooking fire. Cascoli built a great blaze in the center of camp. Drums started low, steady as a heartbeat. Yana brought out the sacred pollen. Nantan lifted Clara to his shoulders, and the old man retied the eagle-bone necklace around her neck himself, knotting it with rawhide still warm from his hand. "From this night," Cascoli said, voice carrying to every Wickiup, "she is daughter of this band, blood of our blood. Let any man who disputes it speak now or hold his tongue till the mountains fall." No one spoke. Years rolled on like wagons across the plains. Clara grew tall and straight, hair black as crow wings, speaking 3 tongues before she was 15. She opened the first school under a brush ramada, where Apache and ranch children sat side by side, learning letters and tracking signs in the same dust. Elena and Nantan added 2 sons and another daughter to the fire circle. The trading post they built at the mouth of the canyon did honest business with both worlds, and the old hatreds thinned like morning mist. But every winter, when the first snow dusts the peaks, the people still gather close around the fires, and an old warrior with silver in his braids tells the young ones how a half-starved child once walked into a blizzard selling a bone necklace and bought, with one sentence, the future of an entire nation. And the mountains listen, because they remember the night the earth spoke through a little girl, and no one has forgotten since. The fire's down to embers now, and the Chiricahua Mountains are quiet again. A little girl walked into a blizzard with nothing but a bone necklace and a desperate sentence, and walked out with a father, a people, and a future no court or bullet could ever take away. That's the kind of story that still raises goose flesh on old warriors and makes kids sit a little closer to the flames. So, tell me in the comments, what hit you hardest tonight? The moment Clara stepped between the guns? The night the earth itself warned her? Or just the raw truth that love, real love, doesn't ask permission from any law but its own? Drop your thoughts below. Share this one if it moved you, and ride safe till the next campfire. Until then, keep listening for the ground when it starts to breathe. See you on the trail.